right, for more on impeachment, let's welcome in Florida Congressman Greg Steube. Congressman Steube serves on the Judiciary Committee. Congressman, thanks so much. I know it's a very busy day for you. I appreciate you making the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, I had Representative Debbie Lesko on the show yesterday, and the first question I asked her, and it was very disappointing. I said, how is Chairman Nadler treating the Republican members of the committee? And she said, like, we don't exist. That's how bad the situation is. Do you share that sentiment?
It's been like that all year. I mean, I would take you back to the very first major piece of legislation the Democrats tried to ram through the House, through the Judiciary Committee. We only got through 9 of like 100. I think we had 90-something amendments. They got through 9 of them. They shut us down. They moved to previous questions, which means they forced a vote. They wouldn't let us speak on our amendments. They wouldn't let us hear all of our amendments. And I've never seen anything like that before. Coming from a state legislature where I actually chaired a committee in Florida, you would never have done that to the minority party. And that happened one of the very first markups we had in the Judiciary Committee. So it certainly set the tone. And now with how political this impeachment process has become, that's absolutely the manner in which it's being handled. They give us the least amount of time that they are required to give us under the rules. Anything other than that, they just shut you down.
I want the viewers to understand something. I spent a lot of time up in Tallahassee, and Representative Steube's being very honest with you. When he was in the State House, when Republicans ran the State House in Florida, they were very respectful of the minority members. It's nothing like we're seeing in the U.S. Congress with the Dem majority. It's pretty disgraceful what we're seeing. Now, what's bothering me, what's bothering a lot of Americans, Congressman, is these charges that apparently came up in a vacuum last night. First, we heard bribery, extortion. It was all nonsense. And then these 2 charges we've heard nothing about, no evidence presented to support them, abuse of power and obstruction of Congress, come out of nowhere. How do the rules even allow for that?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, starting at the day I was sworn into U.S. Congress, one of my Democratic colleagues that was sworn in with me stated that she was going to impeach the president. This has been something they've been attempting to do since the very time that they started this Congress. It started off with the Mueller investigation. That fell flat when Bob Mueller testified that there was no evidence to justify that the Trump campaign colluded with Russia. Then you heard obstruction of justice for a long time, and that kind of fizzled away. And then out of nowhere, suddenly this whistleblower came, which we know now he coordinated and talked to members of the Intel Committee staff on the Democratic side. And I asked that question yesterday in the hearing, and he refused to answer my question as to, did you speak to that individual? Who spoke to that individual? For how long? What was the basis of that conversation? Did you assist in drafting that application and that complaint when it was filed? And now, all of a sudden, these impeachment articles were being drafted for the last several weeks. And now, so we've gone from all these different theories to now we're going to impeach the president on abuse of power. And that's not even anything that is in the Constitution. The Constitution talks about high crimes and misdemeanors. So they're trying to draw this parallel for the American people that abuse of power is a high crime or misdemeanor. Well, both Bill Clinton and Richard Nixon were actually charged with a crime. They committed a crime. Bill Clinton even lost his law license over it. There's no crime here. So it's almost like they're upset that the president did what he did. They don't agree with what he did, so we're going to impeach him on it and use this very opaque definition of high crimes and misdemeanors. As a lawyer, I can't see how you can make that determination. You can't put your finger on a single crime that's been committed. There's not a crime that is annotated in those articles of impeachment.
You are an attorney, and one of the most bizarre moments was when the Dems allowed a witness to then return to the dais and act as interrogator. How is that permissible under the parliamentary rules? Because that blew my mind. I never thought I'd see anything like that. It's almost as if Nadler's saying, I couldn't care less what a fiasco this is. We're out to take down Trump. We don't really care what America thinks. But how in the world can a witness then go back up onto the dais and become the interrogator?
He can't, and we talked about that, and I talked about that in my time. And not only did he come speak as a witness and then go back up and question, but he came and spoke as a witness, and a lot of the American people probably didn't notice this, but he didn't swear an oath that his testimony would be truthful. The chairman didn't ask him to swear an oath that his testimony would be truthful. So he could sit there and lie to the American public, not be concerned about a perjury charge, and speak for 30 minutes to the American people, talking about his ideas and his opinions, not fact, and then go back up on the dais and act like a member of the committee for an additional 45 minutes and cross-examine witnesses. It's completely unheard of. Flies in the face of the rules, flies in the face of anything that's historically happened here at the House. And it should tell you something. If he was unwilling to swear an oath to his testimony as being truthful, that's what was occurring yesterday in the committee, and I talked about that in committee yesterday.
Now let's talk about a moment between the Republican members and Daniel Goldman where he admitted that Joe Biden did in fact engage in a quid pro quo. Very disturbing. The major networks cut away at that point, and the term quid pro quo has all but disappeared today from the mainstream media. They're not talking about it. Democrats aren't talking about it. That's very significant and should, if this is an ethical congressional leadership on the Democratic side, should result in investigations into Joe Biden, shouldn't it?
Well, and then when the chairman, Jerry Nadler, tried to redirect the witness to allow him some time to explain that, he then said, oh, what Joe Biden did was okay because the international community agreed with that decision, and that he didn't respond or receive any personal benefit from that. Well, so it wasn't him that received a personal benefit, it was his son that received the almost more than $50,000 a month, more than most of the people in my district make in a year. So just because it didn't go to then Vice President Biden while he was vice president by the time, that's not corrupt or a conflict of interest. So he didn't even help his position. I think Doug Collins did a very good job of pinning him down of, okay, the way that you're describing a quid pro quo is exactly what Joe Biden admitted to on national television, is exactly what he did. And basically the Democratic staffer agreed with that assertion. And suddenly now, just like you said, you don't hear the Democrats, nor is it in the articles of impeachment, this whole quid pro quo narrative that we've heard for the last month or so.
Yeah, a legal question for you, Congressman. AT&T seems to have turned over Rudy Giuliani's phone records to Adam Schiff, turned over John Solomon, a conservative. I think John Solomon's an ethical guy, but his work tends to favor conservatives. Turned over their phone records. To me, the most sacrosanct protections under the First Amendment would be lawyer-client privilege, journalist source protections. Are Republicans in Congress looking into this?
We asked, members of the committee asked that question as well. Of course, the Democratic staff refused to answer those questions. Devin Nunes, who's the ranking member of Intel, they disclosed that he was one of the people that Rudy Giuliani spoke with. So you have the Democratic majority doing subpoenas on phone records and then disclosing that individuals are talking to members of the committee. It's absolutely unheard of. It's a complete abuse of power. You want to talk about an abuse of power? Chairman Schiff is abusing his power, the chairman of committee, subpoenaing phone records and then releasing details of phone records as who's speaking to who from members of Congress.
You know, the viewers engage with me, when they engage with me on social media, send me emails, I keep being asked the same question. We're not attorneys, but we follow what's going on. What Adam Schiff is doing seems wrong, but who does he answer to? If he's acting improperly, who can step in and do something about it? And the answer always seems to be Nancy Pelosi, who refuses. Is there any other recourse for Republicans or the American people?
The House is the only recourse to punish him for any wrongdoing, and I was actually a co-sponsor of a censure resolution after he came on and lied to the American people about the transcript call between President Trump and the president of the Ukraine, and that censure resolution failed by party lines. All the Democrats voted against it. So unfortunately, that's the only remedy that we have in Congress to try to punish somebody for basically lying to the American people. Devin Nunes has talked about possible legal action based on the fact that they published the fact that his phone records and what his phone records were. So maybe there is some legal action that members can take. I think Mr. Nunes could probably take something like that given the facts and circumstances. But for us as members, that's all we can do. And when in the minority, there's not much that you can do instead of watch the majority trample over your rights.
Real quick, before I let you go, I wanted to ask you about the OIG report. Are you comfortable with what Horowitz found, or are you giving him a pass? His scope was limited. John Durham is still at work. Do you expect more to come from John Durham's report?
Yes, I'm very encouraged by AG Barr's comments after the IG report was issued. I was also encouraged by John Durham's report when it comes out and his statements after he read the IG report. So I think at this point, and if you go back to the IG report, there are many, many things in there that should disturb the American public. And I think that is a very soft approach to what was really going on. So I'm looking forward to AG Barr and the Durham report, and hopefully that'll come out in the near future.
Representative Greg Steube, House Judiciary Committee, Congressman from Florida. Thank you very much. I know it's a busy day for you. Really
thanks for
appreciate
having
you
me.
joining.